Hi everyone, this is Korean back with our first interview in a very long time of the Inside Crypto podcast. I almost said the total another name for the podcast that me and Adam actually do, but that is another story. So Adam is here today. He's one of my best friends, someone I've known for more than a decade. We're probably verging on a decade and a half at some point. And we both live in Taiwan, so it is relatively late. So I'm going to try and keep this short. But today we're going to talk about crypto as usual, because this is the crypto podcast and maybe some other stuff. But before we get into today's crypto topic, Adam, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are? I was going to say where you come from, but sure, you can mention that too.
Sure. I'm from the US. I'm from Virginia specifically. I have a background in computer science. That's what my degree is in, but I've never had the chance to use it because pretty much immediately after graduating university, I went straight into teaching English. So I've been doing that for about 15 years. And despite being a tech guy and having that computer science degree, I'm actually slow to adopt new technologies usually. I don't know why that is. It's not that I have a distrust for them. It's just I don't know. I guess I'm a creature of habit, and even though I'm really interested in it and I like to keep up with it, I just don't adopt them really quick. So like I'll know everything like what an Alexa does and how Siri works and all that, and I don't have either one.
But you spend money on like the technology that's important. So like when the PS4 comes out, it's there. When you PS5 came out, it's there. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, like other technology, of course, it's not that's not on your priority list.
No, and I think I'm a bit kind of old fashioned or traditional in a lot of ways. So I think in a way I have a fear of becoming not too reliant on technology, but that technology will make me lazy. And so I feel like I have to forcefully handicap myself by not allowing myself to have these easier things because I'm worried that I'm going to get too lazy. So this is kind of a way of forcing me to not become entirely just complacent, I guess.
And we've had loads of discussions over the decades that we've known each other about AI and computers and putting stuff online and what you people should be doing. And I remember you've said to me a few times this, if a computer should do it, why are people even here? Or why do we exist? And that sort of stuff. And so I know a large part of it is like you are, and I know a fair number of people, but you are what I would consider one of the most successful people in Taiwan in a sense, because lots of foreigners, so people who aren't Taiwanese, and there are a large number of people who are listening to this, right? For people, foreign people who live in Taiwan, it's difficult to become established in a sense. Some people do, and some people don't, but you have a house, you're married, you have a car, all the trappings that one would associate for our generation. People coming to 40, that sort of stuff. And at the same time, maybe with this success, you still manage to do it without going the traditional, in the States, you'd say like a 401k route or investment route of piling on the shares of Amazon and Apple and that sort of stuff. And that I think gets into the whole other topic. But like going back, like technology and stuff, like one of the things I know about you is you are very much similar to my younger brother. You are very fiscally conservative. You don't splash out on a foldable iPhone or the hottest tech, what you want. And so you'll buy it when it's there and you don't buy anything else. And
Pretty much.
is there a reason for that?
I'm not entirely sure. I guess it would be I grew up in a really large family. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, so there were 9 people. But we were never poor by any means. We were pretty solidly middle class, but I think it was one of those things where, like, a lot of my friends it's one of those things where growing up, we always felt like we were poor, but looking back, it's like, no, we were definitely solidly middle class, but I feel like a lot of my friends were actually probably a little bit better off than we were. It's all relative, and I think, coming from a big family, especially if something's like, Christmas or your birthday, you don't get a ton of gifts, you might just get, like, 1 or 2, and so I think because of that, it in a way, made me paranoid about money, so I'm one of those people that I like having money more than I like spending money. I know a lot of people, they love to spend money, they like to buy stuff. I just like that security blanket of knowing that there's, like, this pile of, money behind me that if there was an emergency or something like that, I don't have to worry. So I guess like the grasshopper and the ant, that old parable. I'm the ant. I'm the one that's thinking like winter is going to at some point. I want to be able to not have to worry then. So I'm gonna try to, save up as much as I can now to save it up. I'm a dessert after dinner kind of guy. So I think that's why.
That's a great explanation, and I know some of this stuff, and it's nice to have it an official audio record. Exploring that a bit more before we go and jump onto the crypto stuff is, and we've talked about this before, is inflation is up, prices are going up in town. We see them all the time. There was a thing in eggs as well. You've probably seen that on the news, and we've talked about the idea of financial insecurity, rising food prices, global warming. We live in a city which is close to the ocean as well, and as the weather becomes hotter and the waters rise up, things will be affected. And with the way you've planned for your life and your partner's life, do you anticipate this is enough?
It's enough for now.
Okay.
Like if I've done the math and I could live this lifestyle that I'm living now for about 6 months before I would run out of money on my savings. I think about that all the time. I'm like, if without making any changes, how long could I live starting today without making any more money? And I think right now I have about 6 months worth of savings. Now, obviously, if an emergency came up, then I could stretch that out longer because we would cut back on, say, going out to movies or eating out and that sort of thing. But yeah, I always worry about retirement. That's something that always kind of is in the back of my mind and worries me because I'm like, okay, 6 months from now is fine. But if I'm 65, 6 months, it's like, oh God, I better hope that I die at 65 in 6 months. Yeah, that does worry me. But to be honest, I think it's a benefit because Taiwan does have pretty good, no, not benefits, but
Social safety net.
social safety nets. Exactly. Like for example, with the company, they you can pay different amounts of insurance basically, and depending on how much money you put in, it's not a tax exactly, but depending on how much money you put in, you'll be on a different plan for Social Security basically when you're. So, like I said before, I'm the kind of guy that always likes his dessert last. So I'm always like, whatever the top bracket is, always put me in that one because that's going to give me the largest benefit down the road. But at the same time, that's going to force me to live on a smaller budget now. So I won't get accustomed to living off of a big budget and then have to adjust. I'm already accustomed to the smaller budget and the difference is going to be much, much smaller. So I'm always doing that. I think I'm a little overly paranoid because like my wife is not worried about it at all. She's just, we'll be fine.
Like me and Maggie are the same. Like I'm the one I'm not as bad as I used to be when I was in my early 30s, maybe late 20s, early 30s. I was just way too, yeah, later. I'll worry about that stuff later. And now, like mid 30s, I'm like, oh my God, I should have really started worrying about this when I was in my mid 20s. Let's table that off and get into today's topic. So, today, why I thought, like, I've written show notes and I've prepared for this episode already, is like a way I've introduced you. You are like one of the smartest people I know, and you guys probably already listened to it and be like, wow, this kid is wise. It's like Boston people say kid. Ready, set, prepared for the world. And that's why I thought your insight would be very valuable because I think a lot of people in my company, we do crypto on both sides of the company. And before we get into that, if you can recall, when was the first time you heard about crypto?
That's a good question. I remember the first crypto I heard of was obviously Bitcoin. And to be honest, I'm not sure because in my mind, I feel like I heard about it whenever I imagine hearing about it, I'm also imagining like pictures of where I went to university, but I'm like, Bitcoin's not that old. It's not,
It's pretty old. It's more than
it-
10
it's,
years old.
it's more than 10. Okay. So maybe it was when I was in university was the first time I had heard of it. So maybe that was when, I don't know. Because when I think of the first time I was hearing Bitcoin, I always think about the quad at school or certain dormitories or whatever. So maybe that was it, or maybe it was later and my memories are just getting muddled up. I don't know. But it was definitely before, it was definitely back when Bitcoin, you could buy it for like $1 or like $5 or something like that. Back when it was super cheap.
Super cheap. But me too, as well. As I remember back when I was living in Massachusetts, and the Domino's and the 27,000 bitcoins for one Domino's pizza.
Yeah.
So you've seen the news as well, right? The Super Bowl happened recently, and Coinbase had an ad. Scan the QR code. That drove Coinbase traffic up. As well, someone who hasn't been back to America for a while, but you still have lots of connections there. Why do you think American people in particular, and maybe people generally, are getting into crypto more than 10 years ago?
I think I would probably say it has to do with when it first came out. I mean, it was one of these, on the surface, it looks kind of like a Ponzi scheme or like a pyramid scheme. And I think when it first came out, people weren't really sure what this thing is. But then now we've been seeing it consistently going up. And I think now it's one of those, people is, since it's been around 10 years and it's still here, people are, oh yeah, clearly it can't be that much of a scam if it hasn't collapsed at this point. So I think it's just, yeah, the fact that it's been around long enough. And then also too, it's 10 years is half a generation usually. So a lot of the people, you're looking at a different group of people that are in the workforce than, or people who have spending power than what we were looking at 10 years ago, basically. So,
That makes a
and the
lot of
economy's
sense.
improved.
Now, the biggest question, I wrote that as number two, which I think is going to answer lots of people's questions, is because there are lots of Adam Grays in the world who have the financial ability, who maybe don't invest. Why do you think, why are you not into crypto, basically?
For me, it's one of those things where I'm just, I'm not a gambler by any means. And in a sense, crypto is a form of gambling, and depending on how you look at it, in that you never know which ones are going to go up and which ones are going to go down. I remember one time we were talking about it and you said, oh yeah, you should definitely buy some crypto. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't know what to buy. What do I go for? Elysium or Doge or something? And you're like, oh, don't, or Doge or whatever. And you're like, oh, no, don't go for Doge. And see, from my perspective, I'm like, I don't know which ones to buy into. And it's one of those things where I think for a lot of people, they see it very similar to the stock market, where they're like, I know that you can make a ton of money on the stock market. I know that you can get really rich off of it, but you really have to know what you're doing. And I don't know what I'm doing, which means I'd have to basically trust some kind of stockbroker. And I don't trust those kinds of people. So I think that's part of the reason why other people haven't gotten into it. Have you seen, and then also, have you seen the TV show Silicon Valley?
Yes.
Okay. The guy, I think his name is Russ, and he's the 1 trillion or the three commas guy.
I've heard the I know where you're going with this, yes.
Okay, yeah. So at one point, he's talking about how he got into cryptocurrency, and he said he tried 32 of them, and he created, or he was involved in 32 different cryptocurrencies, and 31 of them failed, and only one of them succeeded. But the one that succeeded made up the difference of the other ones, so he ended up making money. And I think it's one of those things where some people see it as, if you're already somebody who's rich or in on this, it's something you can make a lot of money on. If you have a 1 in 31 odds, those aren't good odds. But if you're going to invest money in that, if say, if you're trying to buy a lottery ticket, let's say there's 100 lottery tickets, and the winning lottery ticket will get $1 million, but each lottery ticket costs 1,000. So then you say, oh, I'll buy 100 tickets. I'm guaranteed to win. But if each ticket costs $1,000, you're spending $100,000 to buy those tickets, but you're going to win $1 million. So you're still going to make 900,000, but maybe not everybody has $100,000 to spend. So maybe you only have $32,000. Like, I can only buy 30 tickets. So if you're rich, you're guaranteed to make more money because you can, at least something's going to succeed. But if you're poor, you have to be a little more choosy. And I think people who are in the middle class, that's a financial risk that I'm not really willing to take. And that's what it is for me, especially looking at things like crypto, like Bitcoin. When I saw it, it was not that big of a deal. A lot of people thought it was kind of a joke or whatever. That was back when, was it, you could buy the newest Kanye West album with crypto. He was accepting like cryptocurrency or
Yeah.
something like that. And back then, nobody knew what was going to happen with it, right? Now, obviously, it's huge. But now people see, okay, Bitcoin worth now? Like one
It's
Bitcoin is,
one Bitcoin, I have to look it up. I think it should be like 38 or $39,000.
yeah, exactly.
$39,000 exactly.
Okay, so yeah, it used to be like $1 or $5 US. Now it's $38,000 US. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, it's so big. If I wanted to buy Bitcoin now, I'd have to invest $38,000. I don't have $38,000 to invest. I'm not going to get in on Bitcoin. But then you have all these newer ones, smaller ones, and you're like, well, I don't know which one is going to be big and which one is going to sink. So I think from somebody in my situation, it does feel like a gamble, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't if you don't watch it that much and you don't keep up with it, then you just don't trust yourself to make informed decisions on which one to invest in.
And you're saying like people of our age or maybe our generation, while we might have money, we don't have enough money to gamble.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I was saying before, if you know that if you bought 100 tickets, you're guaranteed to win, but maybe you don't have enough money you can't afford 100 tickets. You can only afford 30 or 20. So then my chances aren't, I'm not guaranteed. I have a 1 in 4%, or I have a 20 or 25% chance. So those are low odds. Whereas a rich person could buy all 100 and then they're guaranteed to make money off of it. And I think for some people in our income bracket, I think it's looking at it like, oh, this is a rich man's game. This isn't for me or my type of people. This is just the social elites trading back and forth, like how property values go up. They buy a house, they renovate it, the price goes up, they sell it to another rich person who does something else with the property, the price goes up again, and the richer keep getting richer, and us middle class people stagnate in the middle. And I think for a lot of people, it feels like that. This is not necessarily for the rich elite, but some kind of elite, techno savvy elite or something like that. And us not being in on that group, it's always going to be a risk. And yeah, I think for me that's what it is, and I think there's probably other people that would feel similarly.
No, I definitely agree, and I think I've spoken to people here in Taiwan, just people outside of Taiwan as well, friends, family, cousins, and you've expressed a sentiment that they have said and told me indirectly or directly in some cases. Now, moving on to the question from that is, what would it take to get you into crypto? And no holds barred, besides free money, of course. Oh, or okay, maybe free money is on the table. So, what would it take you to get you to crypto? Knowledge, money, no holds barred. Yeah, go for it.
It would be one of those things. I know a lot of times. I think this is probably one of the differences that between me and a lot of other people. I know that they do things like this because some people say I could never do that, and for me, it's like, I can't do that now. But a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I don't know how you do this," and I'm like, "Well, it's the same way anybody else does it. I just try and then eventually succeed." So I think if I just maybe did a little more research and paid attention and got a feel for it, maybe I'd have a little more faith in myself to be able to make informed decisions in these sort of things. But also, strangely enough, for me, I would feel more like if crypto was in a way stable, if it wasn't fluctuating or they drop or increase or decrease in price. So for me, that would be a big thing. And that kind of goes into another thing for me that I think maybe some other people haven't really adopted it yet, is because when they look at crypto, the conversation is almost always about the price of crypto going up and making money. And that seems to be the dominant conversation around crypto. But I think for your average person, they just want to be able to walk into a store and be able to buy something with their money. They want to be able to use a credit card, or they want to be able to use a debit card or cash. If I can't go into 7-Eleven and use crypto to buy a bottle of tea or something, to most people, that doesn't necessarily have as much value. But if it's stabilized, then I think people would start seeing it as, oh, yeah, this is just like a credit card. Or this is just, was it?
Yes, Apple Pay,
Or,
Google Pay, that sort of
or
stuff.
yeah, those sort of things. And I think in that sense, it's like, oh, it's just digital money. And people would see it as digital money and would probably be more inclined to use it. But when it fluctuates up and down so much, people are like, this isn't digital currency. This is some kind of goods. It's like a stock. It's something to be traded, not something to be used in a way.
Have you heard of stablecoins?
I have not.
So stablecoins are basically cryptos that are pegged to the dollar. So there's a bunch. There's a company in the States called Circle, and they do USDC. There's another company in the States, USDT. They do the largest backed stablecoin by volume. So it's basically one USDT or USDC for $1 American. So if and like you take some of those, there are options where you can put that in a bank, in a crypto bank, and you can get up to 12%, from 12% going up to 30% interest on your dollars.
See, something like that I would be cool with. Something like that I would jump on, because that's basically like a savings account. you put the money in the bank and you don't have instant access to it. But
Yes.
yeah,
Actually, you can always transfer it out whenever you want. You just lose your. Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah. So something like that would definitely appeal to me.
Okay.
In that.
So
But
I
yeah,
mean,
I've never heard of that before, actually.
and what I've always thought about it as well. Now after working in crypto for the last 6 7 months, I realized knowledge is a big thing, and I mean doing this podcast and doing the videos and stuff allows me to spread knowledge, and that's why I'm glad. I should have actually asked you to come on a long time ago. You're always so insightful whenever we get to chat. So now we talked about what would get you into crypto. I should preface this question by saying is like Adam is the person. If you guys have ever seen our podcast, the Middle Age Gaming Podcast, Adam's done all the art for that, the intros, the live stuff. Like the dude is an amazing artist. I think he should be doing NFTs, and he's very modest as well. And I've tried to get him to, if not do NFTs, to at least work for an NFT company like Magic Eden or OpenSea. What do you think about NFTs as an artist, as someone who has like real art skill as opposed to me, and as a computer science person? What do you think about it?
I think there's a lot of potential, but I think the way they're being used right now, like as in today, is a bit sketchy. For example, what was it? The ape things that
Bored
people were
Ape, you gotta
doing?
climb.
Okay, so something like that. And then people are saying like, "Oh, you make this into an NFT and you can trade it up." But nobody really actually wants that. It's just the novelty of having an NFT. And in that sense, you're just trying to convince other people that it just really seems like you're trying to convince people that NFTs can make them money. And it's not, it just, you're just trying to get people in on the NFT thing, right? That seems to be the entire kind of drive behind it. And then also you read things in the news like where people were making NFTs for like local olive gardens. So it's like, oh, you can own the NFT for this olive garden. I could just look at any, and these weren't the owners of the olive gardens. These weren't people in any way associated. And you can just make an NFT for anything. And I think for a lot of people who look at that, it looks sketchy because it's like, oh, you're just like a snake oil salesman, the people that are doing that. And I think that kind of gives NFTs a bad image. And so I think for right now, something like that, because yeah, especially with the art and the online art, and the idea that, oh, we can make this image, but anybody can copy and paste it. So you have ownership rights to it, but you have no distribution rights in a way. So it's, yeah, so it's just a weird situation. But I do think that, because we talked about it on the other podcast, that it does have a lot of potential in the sense that, for instance, like we were talking about with collector's items, if you have something like a Beanie Baby or something, to most people it's just a stuffed animal and it has no value, but to a collector it has value. And I think that's one way that NFTs could be useful, is for these kind of collectors people, but that means that they're not for the general population. They're for specific parties or people specifically interested in trading in these things. And the fact that they're being pushed as something that everybody should be in on and everybody should get into is, it feels like back when Beanie Babies were coming out and people were saying these are going to be collector's items. Buy them all. Buy as many as you can. Someday these are going to be worth it. And then of course they're not. And so it feels like somebody was like that. They're trying to convince you that something's going to have value, and the only reason it has value is if they convince you it has value.
But isn't that generally art in a sense? Is somebody likes a Jackson Pollock and perceives value in
Right.
it, so he pays money for it. Isn't that what art?
Right. But the difference between that is there is only one Jackson Pollock. I mean, you could have somebody come in and make a forgery, sure, and your average person probably never tell the difference. I certainly wouldn't be able to. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which one was the original and which one was not the original. But because I'm the kind of person who wouldn't be able to tell you if it was original or not the original, I would probably just be as inclined to buy something fully aware that it was a cheap knockoff and hang it on my wall, because I don't really care if it's the real one or not. Because if I did care, I would learn how to tell the difference. And I think in that sense, NFTs, like for instance, now people are talking with NFTs with games and that sort of thing. And I do like the idea that you can have some sort of digital ownership over something and it's tradable, in the sense that you can forfeit your rights or access to something and sell it to somebody else. And so you can create online goods that are traded in real world in real world ways. But at the same time, but that's forced scarcity. Why would you force scarcity in a way unless you're specifically trying to just drive up the value of something? Yeah, so it's in a weird spot. Like I understand the appeal of it if for some people. I understand if you're a collector and you want to be like, hey, I have the official one. For instance, let's say Banksy, the famous artist, let's say he makes a digital thing and you're like, I want that. And I want to be known as the person that owns it. I don't care if people use it as the background of their computers. I don't care if people print it off on a piece of paper and put it in a frame and hang it on their wall. I just want to be the official owner of this Banksy thing. And so you pay money and then you basically get a certificate saying, yes, you are the only person who officially owns this. Everybody else's is just a knockoff. And I could understand the appeal of that. Somebody thinking like it's a status thing. And I get that. So from on that perspective, I can get it. But right now, let's face it, most of these the ape things that those are not status symbols. That yeah, I think in that sense, it just yeah, it's a weird. So yeah, yeah, you're in a weird spot.
You touched on a very cool point, and I think I've seen that echoed on Twitter. Do you think NFTs is being pushed too much in like Twitter, social media, that sort of stuff? Is that like it's becoming too much for regular people? They're starting to develop negative emotions because it's being pushed so much.
Yeah, I think they're being pushed too much, and I think they're being pushed a little bit too hard. And this is the thing too that I think this is one of the things that when we were doing the other podcast and I was explaining it to our other host Antoine, was I was going through the description of it that somebody had posted on online, and he was like, well, "That seems very complicated." And I feel like a lot of times people specifically go out of their way to be as unclear about it as they can. So I feel like sometimes people try to make it confusing because it's like an emperor's new clothes kind of thing. If it's confusing to you, then it must be really cool. Or if this person understands it and you want to look like you understand it. So when they say it, you're like, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really valuable. That's really cool. I totally want one. But in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know what's happening. And so I think there is, I think there are people out there that the NFT technology, I think, is perfectly legitimate and perfectly fine. But I do think there's a lot of people out there who are just trying to make a quick buck and they realize that this is one way to do it. And it's soiling the general
Perception of the
perception of it. Exactly. Yeah.
very cool. Good point. Moving on, like you said at the beginning of today's shows, that you have a very good grasp of technology, and I think our listeners and viewers are understanding that from your perspective, somebody who's not into crypto, and you've given us a broad range of opinions today. Do you think crypto is here to stay? Do you think Biden's here signed an order this week about this a U.S. central cryptocurrency and a lot of different regulations? So you said absolutely. Any reason?
Two reasons. One, the fact that it's stuck around this long and the fact that so many people are investing in it. Obviously, not every cryptocurrency is going to succeed, but the fact that enough of them are succeeding, they're just going to be sticking around forever unless there's some sort of like bubble, like a property bubble or something like that. And the entire thing collapses. But I don't think that would happen, at least not at this point. I think it's kind of survived long enough that it's become stable enough. But also because on a more personal note, like I said, I'm typically the kind of person who doesn't adopt new technology quickly. I like to know about it, but I don't necessarily adopt it. And the fact that I'm so late to the party, I feel like that probably means it's going to be successful. So, yeah.
All right, now we're about the same age. We've talked about this already. I've mentioned this on the show. My mom's asked me, like, oh, should she buy some Bitcoin? And I said, yeah, if it's easy for you to do, because it's not that easy for you to invest into crypto, generally speaking, I feel. What would it take for your mom to say, hey, oldest son Adam, I had this thing called about crypto. Should I buy some Ethereum or Bitcoin, or what do you think would take for your mom to be comfortable with this, or your dad?
I think my dad would be more comfortable with it than my mom. But I think in their case, it's one of those okay, if somebody, if you want to go to Vegas, probably the best thing to do is to give yourself a set amount and be like, I'm not going to spend over this amount. And then probably, so this is how much I'm going to spend. And if I lose it, that's fine. I've accepted now that I could lose this. And if I make money, great. And I think in that sense, if they were like, we have some extra cash over here, If we lose it, it's not a huge deal, but let's just give it a try, right? We have nothing really to lose except the money itself, and we don't need that money. It's just, and in that sense, I think you're going into it almost as not even as like an investment, just for fun. It's like every Chinese New Year, my family buys the lottery tickets and everybody
Yes.
scratches off the lottery
Yes.
tickets. And we only do it at Chinese New Year. And sometimes we win money and sometimes we don't, but we don't do it for the, we're not doing it as a way of making money. We're doing it as a way of having fun. And I think for them it would be if they were already stable in terms of retirement and they're like, okay, I know that I'm not risking my nest egg, then yeah, this is like a fun thing to do on the side. I know, like for instance, a lot of retired people would get into day trading with stocks and stuff because they're like, if I lose it, that's fine because I'm not investing my retirement. I'm just investing some extra side cash that I have. And then the more they do it, the better they get at it. It's like anything else. It's like playing chess
Practice.
or whatever. Yeah,
Yes.
it's just practice and being able to recognize like, oh, uh, this is going down or this is going up or this is the kind of thing that's going down but will go up again. And yeah, I think if it was not a financial risk, I think she would be, yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. Last question for today is not on the list actually. I was thought about this as I'm pondering over the conversation we've had tonight. Is we've talked about crypto as a speculative asset, volatile prices. You've mentioned NFTs for art, sort of quick flipping stuff, gaming on the gaming side. We've mentioned, like we talked about stable coins, right, which you didn't know before. And we talked about going into 7-Eleven, and that's still my dream as well. Because even Google Pay is not like super convenient. You go, you check out, you have to enable NFC on your phone. If you don't have it already enabled, you gotta touch it to the pad, you gotta wait for the transaction to process. Like, what's, as a non crypto person, what is the most interesting aspect of crypto that we've talked about today, or to your knowledge?
Personally, for me, I think the most interesting thing that for crypto is, and this is something just for me because obviously I'm from America, but I live in Taiwan. But just this idea of having some kind of global currency where you don't have to worry about exchange rates. Because sometimes when we travel, Taiwan's a small island, so we travel, or at least we used to travel quite a bit. We would go to Japan or go to America or go to the Philippines, and every time you have to exchange money, and there's all these exchange rates and that sort of thing. And to me, the appeal of crypto is the fact that it's actually universal in a way, right? You can go to Japan if you could just go to Japan and spend it, or go to America and spend it. And the idea that we could have just one form of currency that you don't really have to worry about these exchange rates and that sort of thing. To me, that would be that's what I think is the most interesting.
I totally agree with you. And you just like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, yeah, that is interesting because it is like, I hate having to go to the bank and exchange money, or even you do the online stuff, you go online, you book and say, okay, I'm gonna exchange this amount, then going to the bank and exchange money, and even doing it on a credit card and stuff, it's a pain. But like, Japan is one of the most regulated places for crypto in Asia recently. The Japanese government's gotten behind it, and yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, go to Japan, go back to the States, go anywhere and pay in Bitcoin or pay in Ethereum or pay in stablecoin, and not have to worry about exchange rates or somebody stealing your cash, or back in the old days when we were kids, travelers checks and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
I think along with that too, like for instance, I know a lot of people use Google Pay and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm slow to adopt. Somebody who still uses cash for basically everything. Part of that is I had my credit cards numbers basically stolen a couple times in college. But then also for me, like we were talking about how I'm fiscally aware and that sort of thing. Part of the reason I like cash is because every time you spend it, you see it. You have to open up your wallet and you see the money flying out of your hands. And in a way, that's kind of it's a deterrent for me to overspend because I'm kind of like like you have to hand it physically away. And I think one thing that kind of worries me about switching to something like Google Pay is I could easily just start buying stuff and not really paying attention to how much money I'm actually spending, whereas cash forces you to pay attention to that. But with something like crypto, I personally would still have that problem of maybe not paying attention. But I think, for instance, if we go to Japan, we exchange all the money that we need when we go to Japan. I'm thinking in Taiwan dollars. And so if we're spending stuff in Japan, It's, oh, okay, am I spending too much? Or because then I have to think, okay, in Taiwan dollars, like how much am I spending? But if it's crypto and you're just used to the one thing, you kind of like, oh, I spent 5 satoshi. What are the satoshis? Are the smaller ones?
Bitcoins, right? Or just
Yeah.
like you
Okay.
spent like 0.001 Bitcoin or 100th of a
Right.
Bitcoin or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're like, oh, okay, I've spent 100th of a Bitcoin. If I'm doing that here and then I go to Japan and I spend a 200th of a Bitcoin, I know Japan's a little bit more expensive, but I immediately can gauge
Yes.
how much money I immediately have a sense of how much money I'm spending, as opposed to if I change it into Japanese yen and then go to Japan and I'm like, okay, it costs this much. Okay, it costs this much. And then I have to go through and calculate like how much am I really actually spending right now. So in that sense, it would be really convenient for me as well.
Yeah, yeah, and you made a good point, and I think it would solve your issue as well as being because like when I hired somebody to edit our Mag podcast, right, and he wanted $50 of stablecoin USDC or USDT, and I was like, cool. And when I sent the money and it shows the money, my account went down by $50, and I'm like, that is definitely deterrent because you're right about the Google Play. When I was using Google Play regularly, Google Play does not show your balance in your credit card or your debit card or how much you spent. It shows your transactions, but you're not saying, okay, oh my God, it could end up in the month. Like I've spent 50,000 Taiwanese dollars and stuff. But whereas with crypto or with cash, as you're spending money, you can see your balance going down in your crypto wallet, or you can see your cash leaving your wallet, which is a very good point.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Any final thoughts for our audience today about crypto, money, finances, concluding pearls of wisdom?
Not off the top of my head. I've always wanted to get into I actually I shouldn't say that. I haven't always wanted to get into crypto. When I first heard it, I was kind of in the same boat as a lot of people, like, ah, it's just a scam. And I was in the computer science department. A lot of people, and even in our own department, there were people that are like, oh my God, this is going to take off. And other people are like, come on, no, this is just, no, this is silly. But yeah, I've always wanted to get into it. I think it's just one of those things where I've just always been overly cautious. So
That's cool. I think that's a great way to end today's episode. And thank you very much for your time because it is like
oh, no problem.
11:37 p.m. at night. I appreciate it. And hopefully, actually not hopefully, I'm definitely going to have you back on again once I
Oh,
somehow
fantastic.
convince you to get into NFTs or work in crypto or start investing something or the other. We'll see. And then we can talk about that experience a few months down the line.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you very much. And everyone, that is it. I'll talk to you guys later.